You ever think about saxophone reeds having an expiration date? Factory fresh, humidity barrier package, reeds sealed at ideal humidity level. I mean, this has been in my closet for years. Sealed up. I trust it, good process, good wood. It's definitely, yeah. Well, and I will say, the Van Doren Paris reeds, definitely the most I use throughout middle school, high school, college. Consistently great. It's one of those things where you have remnants of something you used to do a lot more. And in this case, yeah, a sealed saxophone reed, which, they're not cheap. It's they're definitely cheaper than oboe reeds, but it's fun to find things that it's basically a reminder that I was staying prepared just in case, my reeds would break, get pretty bad. Still had some extra ones in store. And looking back at the things I've done over the years, there was this thing where in the video game industry, there's been a lot of remasters and remakes, bringing back things from the past. And so it's interesting when you go through your old game collection and you start picking and choosing which games did get remade, which games were brought back, which games weren't, which games got sequels, which games didn't. And Super Mario All-Stars is a case where it's too good to be true. It was too good to be true back in the early 90s when it came out. Super Mario All-Stars came out on the Super Nintendo, and it remade 4 Nintendo Entertainment System games. Technically, Lost Levels is Famicom Disk System, but that's the Japanese NES, their version. And so the premise of let's take 4 ground-breaking games. Like, these games helped not just form the Super Mario Brothers universe, the franchise, but video games as a whole reference these games all the time. And so they take these games that were already really good and they fully remake them. To me, it reminds me of, when I did football going into middle school, into 6th grade. That's when I started really hearing the term 110%. That and, just other things. In fact, going back to marching band, there was the discussion of, 110%. The often mindset of pushing yourself a bit beyond 100%, right? What is satisfactory to you and what can you go beyond? Super Mario All-Stars is definitely 440%. It is incredible I recently went back and played it, but not just played it, I wanted to beat all 4 games. And I've only beaten Super Mario Bros. 2 leading into this. So the fact that I was able to fully go through these games and see what the designers were going after, for a lot of the cases in the final levels, the first time I ever played some of them, especially Super Mario Bros. 3 and Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels, it is... Where do I go beyond passion project? Oh yeah, I guess it's 110% 4 times. It is a game with 4 games in it, and none of those games felt like the corners were cut at all. In fact, they went far beyond. Composer Koji Kondo added new riffs in the original Super Mario Bros. Theme, you hear dun 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 dun. Yeah, he'd add some new rolls to it. He added new songs to Super Mario Bros. 1. He fully remixed all the soundtracks. Now, to be fair, Mario Lost Levels uses the same soundtrack as Super Mario Bros. 1, totally fine. But that experience of seeing the case of Koji Kondo remaking all of his music, and then the gameplay designers made sure that Mario and Luigi played as they did in their original games. So Super Mario Bros. 1, 2, 3, and Lost Levels, the characters behave a bit differently, especially, with Luigi. Luigi is all over the place, but, in a good way. In Super Mario Bros. 2, Super Mario Bros. Lost Levels, he jumps higher than Mario. He tends to have lower traction, lower just general control. And he did that in Mario Bros. 2 and Mario Bros. Lost Levels remakes. And for this, I was so impressed. I was so impressed also because they got down the different physics of jumping on enemies. In Super Mario Bros. 1, you jump on a bullet bill, you go a bit high. Definitely some puzzles you can do with that. In Super Mario Bros. 3, one of the last levels in the game, one of the big puzzles is can you jump off a bullet bill and just skyrocket? We're around 3 times higher than in Super Mario Bros. 1 and Lost Levels. You know what that tells me is that the programmers didn't just copy and paste how much momentum you get from Super Mario Bros. 1 and put it into Super Mario Bros. 3. They studied Super Mario Bros. 3 as an isolated game and matched the physics there. Now, obviously, there's sound effects that are shared throughout the games, but they really individualize these games. There's such an easy path that companies can take to maybe go 110% with one remake, and then try to carry over as much as possible into the others, and then it's not as faithful. But in this case, I mean, maybe that can make for a good game, but in this case, they really did go 440% with the fact that it's above and beyond remake, above and beyond remake, above and beyond remake, above and beyond remake that were individualized. And the fact that this was sold as a Super Nintendo game at like the standard price back then, which yes, video games were pretty expensive back then, but for what video games were valued at, you really were buying 4 games for the price of 1. I know people say, oh, well, there's 4 NES games on a Super Nintendo game. But honestly, those games are so good. Super Mario Worlds came out, and I would say that it's obviously on a similar caliber to any of those games. So the fact that Nintendo decided to bring those to their new system, fully remake them, and sell them into one cartridge is incredible to me. That is beyond just wanting to make profit. These were people that were paid, seems pretty well, to push themselves to say, hey, these people really enjoyed these games, let's bring it onto the new system. What are things that we could add that could be fun, but how can we not undermine what makes for the identity of these games? So when I beat Super Mario Bros. Lost Levels, the history on that was the original Super Mario Bros. 2 in Japan. But it was so similar to Super Mario Bros. 1 with like no new music. It had a few new things, and then all the levels were new. But the levels were in the lens of being more difficult, really difficult, to the point that when you play it in All-Stars, the remake, Super Mario Bros. 1, if you get a game over on World 3, you start over at the start of World 3. There's 4 levels per world. So if I were to lose my last life to Bowser in World 3, technically 3-4, I have to go back to 3-1. It's a good challenge. I enjoyed it a lot. It's a fun way you can see where the game designers say, hey, you can beat this level, but sometimes the key to a platformer is to platform less and observe, then start jumping. And I definitely felt that way. And in Super Mario Bros. Lost Levels, the game was so much more difficult that it saves per individual level. So if you get a game over, you just restart at that level, no checkpoints. And I appreciate that. That is actually one of those cases where, there's a debate of should video games be easier. I think in general, something like Super Mario Bros. 1, 2, USA, Super Mario Bros. 2, and Super Mario Bros. 3, those are great sets of difficulties, and they all kind of ramp up at the end, but it feels fair. And, I guess to me, my mindset of fair is, hey, I'm playing the game, I signed up, that's the contract. If it gets crazy difficult, that's the game I played. In the design aspect of ramping up difficulty, fair is usually what people say, but obviously that's up for debate. So instead of fair, I would often say that the difficulty ramp felt natural. It felt like you can see the hill towards the end of the roller coaster, and there's going to be a lot more build up, and you have to manually build up. It's not an automatic roller coaster. You know what? Let's get some oars. This is the river trek, and then you see the giant hill. It got a stream uphill there. And Mario Lost Levels was definitely it started difficult from the get-go, and it definitely was. Yeah, it was a personal reflection of my borderline addiction to challenge. So the fact that the game designers understood that what was the original premise for Lost Levels of being so difficult, once they heard that feedback, they changed it to save per level. I can feel the amount of effort put into that just by playing the game. And it still was super difficult, even by just saving on each level. But I enjoyed it. I had fun playing while trying to look at the perspective of these game designers. And it was game designers that you can tell they enjoyed working on Super Mario Brothers. And the fact that they got to remake these games again after only a few years is awesome. It is one of those things where it is a lightning in a bottle game collection. We hardly see game collections like that. Like the Orange Box, I think, in 2007, I think matches Super Mario All-Stars. That was a bunch of new games along with Half-Life 2 and Half-Life 2 Episode 1. So in that case, it was a bunch of new games in a collection. Super Mario All-Stars remakes the older games, but they do stand well by themselves as separate, like, Super Nintendo games, with obviously the understanding context of lost levels being a bit more difficult, but that's okay. And I definitely, it's, you know, you look at, can something like that be pulled off today? Can they go back and take, say, Legend of Zelda? Can they remake Zelda 1, 2, Link to the Past, and Link's Awakening for one collection? They remade Link's Awakening recently, and they sold it as an individual $60 game. Link's Awakening remakes, you know, it's pretty good. But that's already showing that, you know, Nintendo, as of, you know, this day and age, would rather individualize and sell them per individual remake. That's its own discussion of modern technology. Video games take a lot longer to make. But that being said, I don't feel like Super Mario All-Stars is primitive. In fact, I think it's way ahead of its time because of that 440%. Honestly, it's kind of a blunt reminder to game designers that being able to go above and beyond and pushing for new things in a game that's already been made for new ideas while respecting the core aspect of the game. What's the core fundamental design? What's the artistic vision? I think that's a match made in heaven. It's a match made in heaven for a wonderful experience. Something I enjoyed singing along the way, getting mushrooms, fire flowers, a few starmen every now and then. You know, it definitely was a blend of nostalgia, but also a new outlook for me. I coming back with the understanding of more modern games and, you know, the good and the not so good of the industry, whether it can be indie game passion projects or it can be, unfortunately, greedy higher-ups that want to cut a lot of corners for potential re-releases or making a new game in an established series. Playing Super Mario All-Stars honestly was like finding that awesome oasis in the desert. The awesome oasis that has you motivated as you leave to go find more out there in the world. I love Mondays.